This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Razor. I'm Emma Keeling. It's no secret that the globe is warming. In 2020 alone, dozens of record-breaking temperatures were reached. The highest was in California's Death Valley, with a scorching 54.4 degrees Celsius. The Arctic is warming faster than anywhere else in the world, and this has huge implications on global weather systems. The MOSAiC expedition is spending a year drifting through the Arctic Ocean to take a closer look.
Well, we're there because the ice is in decline, right? We know this in general, that the sea ice is declining pretty rapidly. The MOSAiC expedition is a year-long adventure in the Arctic where we take an icebreaker and freeze it into the sea ice and passively drift with that sea ice with all kinds of instrumentation installed on and around the ship. It's really important for the climate of our Earth. And so we want to understand that process. We want to understand why the ice is declining so rapidly. At a climate scale, ice, plays a role for our Earth system, right? The Arctic is very cold, the tropics are very warm. This drives large-scale circulation and weather patterns. This is part of our global system.
As we lose ice, what becomes exposed is the surface ocean, which is dark. And you can imagine that the ocean now is absorbing all of that heat. And unfortunately, it's that positive feedback, right? So the more ice you lose each year, the more open water you have. We see warming of the oceans, which means warming of the planet. And so loss of sea ice has a direct influence on global warming.
Sea ice grows and shrinks each year as it freezes in the winter and melts again in the summer. The Arctic summer ice minimum in 2019 was the second lowest ever recorded. The Arctic warming rate is twice the global average, and some researchers believe, even with climate action, ice-free summers will be seen before 2050. The MOSAiC expedition will be in the Arctic for a full year to gain a better understanding of the complex Arctic climate system.
Many of our previous studies in the Arctic have been at a time where we can access the Arctic, and that's typically in the summer months, so May through late September. But we lack many measurements from the winter and early spring, and that's because we've never had the opportunity, or very limited opportunity, to actually be there.
You can't just go there at one time of year and hope to understand the sea ice life cycle. You actually have to be there for the whole year to understand how these processes vary and change over different seasons.
During the 12-month period, the Polarstern will be the base for the interdisciplinary science expedition.
So that flat area would be a potential point for that city? Right.
There are over 600 scientists involved from all over the world, with 60 on board at a time. Their state-of-the-art detection tools will monitor and record data on the atmosphere, sea ice, the ocean under the ice, and its ecosystems.
So this is the overarching goal of MOSAiC, is to bring these things together, understand the linkages and the cross-cutting processes and feedbacks between those compartments of the Arctic system, so that we can not just improve, say, weather predictions, but that we can also improve our predictions of how sea ice will change in the future as we predict how global temperatures will change.
Their research work continues, even under extreme Arctic conditions.
Oh, you think we should do one more?
There are all kinds of complexities of working and living in the Arctic. It's cold, of course. The ice is moving. So there's all of those challenges. When I was there before, it was dark. We were in the wintertime, and so it was dark all day long, pitch black even. And so we're, the only light is your headlamp, and you go out there and it's windy and it's minus 40 degrees. So it's quite an extreme environment. And now we look forward to going out there in the summer when the sun just circles the sky, 24 hours of light. As soon as we entered the ice in September, within hours we saw a polar bear out on the ice. They're curious, right? They like to go up and say, what is this device that's out here that I've never seen? And so they sniff things. Sometimes they like to play with things. They actually took out one of my research stations. I have this meteorological station, and a polar bear had a little fun with it and did some damage. And so, yeah, polar bears are definitely a part of the activities out there. But a typical day includes a lot of checking on instrumentation, making sure it's operating well. It includes teams of people that go out on the ice on little mini adventures out to, sample the ice. They go take ice cores and go out and collect those as a group, or go and take some instrument out to look at the transfer of gas at the surface through these little chambers that can be put on the ice. So each day there are little adventures like that to go do very targeted activities.
We execute a whole suite of tasks to build this increasingly large, complex data set of measurements. I'm a microbial oceanographer by training, so I'm very interested in this tiny, you can't see them, but the tiny single cell organisms that live in the ocean and in sea ice, things like bacteria and small cells that are known as phytoplankton.
Phytoplankton, or plant plankton, form the base of the marine food web, indirectly feeding everything from small fish to multi-ton whales. They typically bloom every spring, and the decline of sea ice is having an impact on when and where this is happening, which has a knock-on effect on the whole ecosystem.
These little guys, they're like the engines of global geochemical cycles. So I'm particularly interested in these guys and how they change carbon and nitrogen in seawater and in sea ice. And that means that they also control things like climate relevant gases like carbon dioxide and the production of oxygen.
The data is so valuable to us as scientists, and it's valuable well beyond the individuals that go to the field. We're serving a whole research community of people that are interested in this data.
The Arctic is not able to cool the Northern Hemisphere in the way it was before. And it also means that we see much more drastic extremes in weather in northern latitudes, in the mid-latitudes where you and I are based.
The emergencies that we've seen, right, these crises that we've seen around the globe, many of them are related to a changing climate system. We don't understand what drives them. One of our goals is to get a lot of this information so that we can better understand those processes, so that we can have models that better represent what's playing out on global scales, and then to feed that information to society for a variety of reasons, to feed them to the politicians and decision makers that need good information that will support this decision-making process.
And being in the Arctic and recognizing that this amazing icescape is precious, has an important role in our Earth's sustainability, and trying to learn about it so that we can move forward and have some positive action. I think that makes you realize just how important it is to be there and to be doing the best work that you can do.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought many companies to a halt, but for those in the medical industry, there's been an acceleration in production. Skyports is one such company that's adapted drones to deliver small, high-value medical packages to isolated areas in the UK. They're the eyes in the sky, the flying robots we call drones. These unmanned aerial vehicles were originally designed for military use in reconnaissance missions or targeting the enemy from a distance, changing the way war was waged. Now they're in the hands of civilians who are taking photos and videos. But in the UK, the focus has turned to how drones could transform healthcare logistics, flying life-saving medical packages to isolated areas.
It's fantastic when you speak to people on the ground and they go, oh, this is a trip which usually takes me 6, 12, 24 hours to move a product between A and B, and we can do it in 15 minutes. There's a huge amount of satisfaction with that.
When the pandemic arrived, UK-based company Skyports was already looking into how they could expand their drone delivery business.
Something we've been working on for just about over a year. Working through the technology, it's new technology, so it takes a lot of putting together, working through regulatory challenges, and again, like technology regulation is actually quite new. But then COVID hit and we had a real acceleration in that part of the business because we managed to get through regulatory processes in no less safer way, but a much quicker way as the Civil Aviation Authority prioritised COVID-related responses.
In April, the team started working with the UK National Health Service, known as the NHS, and the Civil Aviation Authority to trial a drone delivery service between the Lorn and Islands Hospital in Oban on the Scottish mainland and to the Mull and Iona Community Hospital on the Isle of Mull. As the head of Skyport's operations, Alex Brown has to work out all the logistics.
We work with some of the world's best drone manufacturers to basically bring their drones in. We up-spec them to a level where we're happy flying them beyond visual line of sight, we call them, and then we operate them for the benefit of our customers, basically. So for a recent project we did up in Scotland, working with the National Health Service, delivering COVID-19 medical cargo, we worked with a company called Wingcopter. They're a company based in Germany. They make what's called a VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing fixed wing drone, which can go about 100 kilometres and carry about 6 kilograms. And we work with them to operate their drones for the benefit of the NHS.
Response time is vital in healthcare, but for the 2,800 island inhabitants, a trip to the mainland can take anywhere from a few hours to 36 hours, depending on when the ferries are running. But this drone can do it in the life-saving time of 15 minutes. It combines the advantages of traditional multicopters and fixed-wing drones. It takes off and lands vertically, but the 4 propellers can tilt, so when it reaches the correct altitude, they transition into plane mode for a faster, more efficient flight. It's powered by up to 4 16,000 milliamp batteries. One battery is equal to 4 phone batteries. It can carry up to 6 kilograms of payload, and the maximum takeoff weight is 18 kilograms.
So we have a central hub, and that's typically, for example, where a pathology lab may be located, and we're flying out to various spokes where there might be a medical practice, for example, or other hospitals where medical samples are being taken. So we base ourselves at the hub. We have a central station there where we have our remote pilots who are commercial qualified drone pilots. They're looking over a laptop basically, and basically how a flight goes is they go through a checklist at the start of a flight, just as normal aviation does. Once the checklist is complete, they load the payload into the drone. So for example, that may be a COVID-19 testing kit, it may be new sample tubes loaded into the drone. They go back to what they call their ground control station, which is basically a laptop. They upload the mission to the drone, and then once that's uploaded, they click fly and the drone takes off by itself. So they do have a remote control to take over if they need to, but we very, very rarely need to do that.
During the 2-week trial, the service ran up to 12 times a day, with drones heading out to sea with their cargo, ranging from essential personal protective equipment, vials for medical samples, and COVID-19 testing kits. So did you have to up-spec that one to send it, because they're travelling a long distance, and Scotland, the weather's not great in Scotland?
A big focus area for us is the communications link, so I won't bore you too much with the drone sort of nerd tech details, but maintaining that link between your drone pilot and the drone itself. And basically when we do that, we use multiple communication links, so things like LTE, which is in your phone, SATCOM, direct radio link. So we typically up-spec those links to make sure that we're happy and the Civil Aviation Authority, who regulates our activities, is happy with how we're operating the flights and we're doing it safely.
And what's the cost of one of these large drones?
Yeah, they're expensive. I won't give you an exact cost, but I will say you could buy a very nice car for the same amount of money.
The pandemic has completely changed how we go about our lives, and for companies like Skyports, it's seen a change of focus. The other part of their business is developing passenger vertiports within cities around the world. While none are operational yet, a vertiport was showcased in Singapore with Volocopter, with plans for the first flights to take off from here in 2023.
So Skyports is a business that does two things. It does infrastructure for passenger carrying drones, so we call them vertiports, but essentially heliports for new electric helicopters.
Do you think it's changed the direction of your company?
Heliports are still a key part, much longer term, so probably, 22 to 3 years before we see the first passenger drone operations. So much longer term business, it's a longer term investment. The drone business is much more near term for revenue streams, much more near term for operations. We're out live flying every day now. So hasn't really changed the direction of the business, but maybe the near term focus, the near term capital allocations is slightly more towards deliveries than we'd anticipated at the start of the year.
Skyports also have a drone for urban deliveries, but it will be a couple of years before we'll see that developed for city environments. Right now, the focus is on rural locations, where the benefits are still being discovered.
The thing that really surprised us is we went up with an idea of where it might be useful and what the benefit of drones could be flying between islands and the mainland. And we certainly fulfilled those ambitions. But what we found was there was enormous engagement from the local community, particularly the doctors and nurses, around what we were doing. The experience that the doctors and nurses had with real life situations just completely broadened the scope of what we perceive to be the benefit. And in fact, next month, or in fact in September, we'll be back for the next phase of the project, which is another 3 months, and broadening the scope from one route A to B now to multiple routes, connecting multiple different healthcare facilities. And it'll be interesting to see how much that increases the utility to the doctors and nurses.
Life moves pretty fast. Ideas move at the speed of sound. Technology moves at the speed of light. If you don't filter out the noise, you might miss the details. We pay attention to the details because they matter, showing you a different perspective. See the difference.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is CGTN. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Almost a third of all food produced for human consumption is wasted every year. According to the UN, this amounts to 1.3 billion tonnes of food, which never makes it from the field to people's plates. But one company in San Francisco is hoping to change this with its novel drying technology.
Everyday food is thrown away in unconscionable amounts. Food waste creates an estimated economic global loss of $2.6 trillion a year. Inside landfills, food is the #1 item. I'm here in a most unlikely place to take on that issue, San Francisco's Treasure Island. It's an artificial island built to host the 1939 World's Fair and later served as a naval station during World War II. But now, inside Hangar 3, the startup Treasure 8 is taking food waste, removing the water, and actually making it enjoyable to eat. A quick change into hygienic attire and I'm ready to meet the brains behind the operation.
Nice to meet you. I'm Derek Hendrickson, co-CEO of Treasure 8. And I'm Timothy Tiles, I'm the founder and co-CEO of Treasure 8. Together
Co-CEOs.
Co-CEOs.
How unique,
right? It works great. It's part of the magic here at Treasure 8. Takes two to tango.
Let's take a look at what you got.
Come on in.
Today's operation is focusing on kale. The produce has come from farmers who've had an excess supply due to shrinking markets because of COVID-19. Workers are separating leaves from the stalk, but neither will go to waste.
There's a different amount of water in the stems than there are the leaves, and we're also going to be working on how can we turn this normal waste that's just mountains and mountains of kale stems into something that's got good nutritional value. We took a lot of the secondary leaf structures and stuff like that from our farmer, and there's going to be a lot of rejected leftover waste this way, but also too is it's not rejected, it's just the surplus that they have right now.
The kale is then placed on a conveyor belt that moves through the key technology, aptly named the sauna. Teams know precisely how much water is going to be removed.
Leslie, what's the moisture loss, do you think, on this first stage? About 27%. Yeah, about 27%, right up just in 6 or 7 minutes.
As the kale comes out, I get a sample. A lot drier than before.
Yep. You can just feel the difference.
And it's being treated gently by the machine. As you can tell, there's no burn, there's no nothing. So this is where the cell structure remains intact and the nutrients remain intact as well.
The sauna allows energy to penetrate the cells of the plant. That causes a phase change of the liquid inside the cell, moving it from liquid to vapor. The vapor creates tiny holes in the cellular wall so that it aspirates water quickly. And while those holes are big enough to let the water vapor molecules out, they're not big enough to let out the micronutrients.
That's Ed. We call him our patron saint. That's Ed Hirschberg, kind of a really famous or well-known food innovator.
Hirschberg helped create MREs, or meals ready to eat, for the military, and some of the first astronaut ice cream. Childs had the fortune to work with him on a project making nutritional snacks for Google.
We called up Ed and said, Ed, what do you've got? We need to really get some dried organic material that's really nutrient dense. And he says, oh, well, I've got this thing I co-developed the USDA. Why don't you call them? So we called them and they said, great, we have this machine here. You want to take a look at it? They said, great. So they brought it over and we started working with it and we figured out how to make it work.
Making it work included designing their factory and the measurements of their machines in virtual reality.
So what we're looking at right now is a virtual version of the sauna machine that you saw in the factory. So we use this for plant placement and then simulation beforehand and sizing and design. If you use full virtualization before you build a factory on large scale factories, you can save up to 20% of your manufacturing, your build out costs because of knowing where stuff's placed. So it comes up here and it's like a big giant S shape inside of it. So what it's doing is instead of having a line that's 3 times as long, you compact it and it's a way to kind of shorten the line, right? So it takes the height and then we control the different melt speeds, the different temperature they're up. So each commodity or each thing has a different time basis. It's kind of hard science, but then once you have your recipe developed and you've been taught it by others, it's kind of, the same thing all the time.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture has licensed the technology exclusively to Treasure 8, which is using the sauna as step 1 before products move to a secondary dryer. The 2 steps have only taken about half an hour before the kale comes out with just a small percentage of water left.
So we go from 100 to under 5 here. And usually in food, if the color remains this way, it means that the underlying quality and nutrition are of high quality as well. Color says a lot.
Compared to raw kale, double the amount fits into this bowl when it's dehydrated, and it's easy to reduce further. The powder has the same nutritional value and won't go bad for years.
So right now it can be used in almost any food application like soups or baking or smoothies, you name it. Our job is to take waste stream kale from a farmer, dry it off, and we're grind it down, and we're going to give this to some soup kitchens and some of the programs to help feed first liners as well as people that are in need of food. And as we're starting to see, one of the challenges with COVID, people's buying power is going to be coming down. They're going to be reaching for more and more crappy food. So it's going to be even more important to get more nutrition in the hands of people.
When it comes to trucks on the road that need to get product from A to B, the heavier or the more voluminous it is, the worse it is, right? So taking the water out, dehydrating it, makes it much easier to get it from A to B. The shelf life is also improved, so it can stay longer, so we don't need chilled supply chains or heavy equipment to get it from A to B.
Treasure 8 is also chipping away at the image of dehydrated food being bland and coarse. Combining it with freeze-drying technology has led to a wide assortment of products, like strawberries, and ones you might not suspect.
Look at that. What do you think that is? It's onion. Is that amazing? Is that amazing? It's sweet.
Dry onion.
Yeah.
It actually tastes good.
It's totally sweet, right?
What is it?
Red bell peppers, so these are bell peppers. They're yellow, oranges, and reds. But you can start seeing these little details. Look how crisp the lines are. Normally when you freeze dry stuff, it's kind of not so smooth, not so clean. Give it a try. It tastes like fresh red bell pepper, doesn't it?
The flavor is really, really amazing.
Yeah, right? And kids eat it like candy. Isn't that amazing?
I would never think of a red bell pepper as a snack for a kid. Treasure 8 says its technology captures an important feature: texture. The crispy crunch is there, whether it's mangoes or even beet chips. What ingredients are there?
Organic beets. That's it. Listen to that crunch.
That is surprisingly good.
Right, no frying or oil, right?
Child says nothing added, especially sugar, is something that separates them from the competition. Treasure 8 is on the left, a competitor's on the right.
Ours is kind of delicate and full like a chip, right? This is like a flat piece of microwave bubbles.
Child says their dehydration technology also kills bacteria and pathogens. But while safety and security are all pieces of the puzzle, ultimately Treasure 8's success may depend on how well its technology fits in with a food system that has changed little in decades.
Our belief is that a piece of technology is not going to change the food system as it needs to be changed or transformed. So that's why we are focusing on food waste and recovering food waste primarily, then reforming that into ways that are more environmentally friendly, more cost effective, and that retain more nutrition, and then deploying that to people through the partnerships that we build with food companies around the world. There's over 1 billion people that do not have access to the right nutrition. And there's about $1.6 trillion of food wasted that gets grown but never makes it to someone's mouth. Connecting all of that in systemic ways and processing it so that the nutrition that is in there gets retained and becomes accessible to people who need it most, that's what we're trying to do here.
That's it for this week's episode of Razor. You can find more of our content on CGTN Europe's social media pages. Look after yourself and each other, and we'll see you again next week.